the back of your head was all lit
Oh,
up,
okay.
We're going to have time for a few questions and answers, and so, yes.
Hi. I just wanted to say that I agree with 99% of what you said on a conceptual level, but at the same time, you have to realize that throughout history, every instance of major social change has had to unite under some kind of banner, like slavery, they were abolitionists, or the civil rights movement, or anything like that. So how would you propose getting people who advocate rationality together to do that in order to make that kind of change possible, to get to the place that you want to go where atheism isn't even an issue?
Right, right. Well, I think it's, I'm somewhat agnostic about the best strategy for doing this, because I think that there may be, the distributed nature of it may in fact be a greater strength than having some kind of centralized, easily discerned movement. I just think it's, what we have to engineer somehow from 1,000 sides is a moment where it just becomes too embarrassing to advocate these ideas in the public space, or when people just can't keep a straight face when they say they believe in God or Jesus is coming back to say. And it's amazing. I mean, the people who do manage to keep a straight face at this moment are the editors of our major newspapers and magazines. I mean, I'm not talking about the Jerry Falwell types. We have to see the smile of irony and self-awareness emerge on their face first. And I think there's something about having a movement that, and this is just my suspicion, and I'll either be proven right or wrong, or we'll never know, but I notice the way the whole new atheist meme has spread, and I notice what people are doing with it. And it has been, I mean, there are people who are launching criticisms of Richard's work who clearly haven't read his work, but they feel that the concept of atheism is sufficient to inform them about the content of a God delusion. And likewise with all of our other books. And there's a shorthand which is circumventing thought, which doesn't occur when you point out just how crazy it is that these percentages of Muslims living in the West believe such and such, or that these percentages of Americans believe X, Y, and Z. When you get to specific beliefs, take something like stem cell research. We have to get to a world in which people recognize that it is intellectually untenable and now even immoral to believe that souls can live inside of petri dishes because of the promise of stem cell research. Something like 70% of Americans already agree with us when you get down to the brass tacks of whether they support the research and why. So it seems to me that we are at our strongest when we are hammering on specific issues and never naming ourselves, always throwing the burden of argument on our opponent, always using words like reason and evidence and talking about what we know about specific points, and showing the liabilities of certain beliefs being translated into specific behaviors in the world. And when you have neurosurgeons and engineers attempting suicide bombings on the streets of London and Glasgow, you have to talk about their specific set of ideas and their specific expectations. I mean, when a neurosurgeon leaps out of a flaming car yelling Allahu Akbar and tries to fight off the people trying to douse the flames, we know that is an existence proof of the fact that this is not merely a problem of education and economics. We have certain ideas being translated into very predictable behavior. So again, I think our movement is bigger than we realize, and we are circumventing that knowledge by our use of the label. Because again, I wrote The End of Faith, and I got there never being aware of atheist groups, atheist movements, and I was never tempted to call myself an atheist. Now, I could be a total anomaly, but I think there are many people who agree with us whenever we get down to brass tacks, who, for whatever reason, just because of how bad the PR is with this word perhaps, would never come to a meeting like this.
As the only one from Utah here, probably.
As the only one here from Utah, probably, I just want to say good job on your presentation.
Oh, thank you.
And I just wanted to ask, me and a friend were having a discussion about you, and I was wondering what your position was on the idea of dualism, whether or not consciousness survives death, and if if you're for that, if you're going to publish any thoughts on that.
Right. Yeah, this is something that I've received a little heat from my fellow atheists. Many people seem to think that I have published my beliefs about the survival of death and psychic phenomenon. I've never said I believe these things. I've just said that there apparently is data there worth talking about, and we should be open to talking about anything. I mean, we should all in this room be able to imagine a circumstance that would convince us of the truth of Mormonism. If someone presents that evidence, I'm all ears. Now, I'm not a dualist. I think dualism is a virtually, totally bankrupt idea at this point. But I don't know what I am in terms of the relationship between consciousness and the brain. If we lived in a universe where consciousness went all the way down somehow, if people like Roger Penrose are onto something and consciousness isn't merely a matter of computation, and there is some spookiness in our physics that we haven't accounted for and would provide the answer to consciousness. I'm not actually a fan of that particular theory, but let's say that were true. I would expect the universe to appear exactly the way it does now. I wouldn't expect this lectern to talk to me. I'm just, I just don't know. It's clear to me that we don't know the details about the emergence of consciousness. While we know enough to discredit the naive conception of a soul that floats off the brain at death and can still speak English and recognize grandma in a tunnel of light.
I wanted to ask, with regard to mystical or spiritual experiences, do you believe the people who claim to have those experiences are legitimately onto something not of this world? I know this is somewhat related to the past question. They're onto something not of this world, or are they just experiencing something, some kind of exotic cognitive or neuroscientific event that we just don't have the research on at present?
Well, there's nothing that I said that's incompatible with the truth of physicalism or materialism. I mean, I'm not making any metaphysical claims on the basis of meditational experience. And it's very clear to me that there are no experiences that people have while in meditation that justify most of the specific doctrines of our faith. There's no experience you can have while meditating that lends credence to the idea that Jesus was born of a virgin, for instance. I mean, that's just not the kind of thing that contemplative experience can do. And I don't know what consciousness is. And so I'm just agnostic about the implications. There's nothing that I've experienced that requires anything metaphysical. And it's the interest for me in meditation is in the difference between happiness and suffering. Why do we suffer? Is our suffering always necessary? These are the kinds of questions that I think are of interest to most people who spend any significant amount of time engaging practices like that.
I just want to say that I'm very disappointed by your speech.
Mm-hmm.
And
I imagine you're in good company, but
I don't believe at all that there is something supernatural, and I think you are going in that direction.
Okay, well, all I can do is reiterate that there's nothing that I've said, I mean, perhaps I misspoke or you misheard, but there's nothing that I am aware of believing that requires the supernatural. And I think as incredulous about what most people believe under the guise of religion as anyone in this room. It's just there is a range of human experience that can take a tremendous amount of effort and inquiry to get a look at. And this has been historically the unique preoccupation of the mystical traditions within religion. It's very different within different religions. But the only people who have gotten it into their heads to go off into a cave for 10 years at a time have been, almost without exception, people in thrall to a belief system, a belief in the supernatural. And yet they've had experiences that are interesting and worth talking about, and don't lend credence to their supernatural doctrines, but which nevertheless have a lot to say about the plasticity of the human brain and the possibility of us transforming our moment-to-moment experience of the world. That's all I'm saying.
Sam,
Yeah.
I consider myself a disciple of yours. I've read your books. I've loved it. I've learned so much. But Sam, I need something to call myself. People talk about the fact that they're a Christian or a Catholic or a Muslim and they say, "What are you? What are you?" I need something to call myself, and I thought about this on a number of occasions. And one of the possibilities that occurred was that I might call myself a rationalist, because that's something that's very, very hard to object to. But I'm wondering what your answer to the question is, Sam. When people talk with you about your religious beliefs and ask you what you are, what you do, what is your answer to this?
Right. Well, this is a pragmatic question, because I started calling myself an atheist, or at least answering to the name, simply because it started to look a little shifty, dodging it in interviews. But because the truth is, I am an atheist by most people's standard of atheism, certainly. And so, just in the interest of being civil, I'm using that word. But I notice that we pay a price every time we do it, and I often, well, more often than not, point out that we're all atheists with respect to Zeus. A point that many of us have made, and again, the point about astrology. No, we're not naming ourselves in opposition to the 1,000 or million or billion bogus ideas that we could all entertain for a few moments. So I question whether we do need a name. I mean, I think just using words like reason and just asking people, just pointing out, for instance, as I did in Letter to a Christian Nation, that every Muslim is essentially an atheist with respect to Christianity, and every Christian returns the favor. I mean, everyone is in mutual criticism of everyone else's unfounded religious certainties, and when we notice those misalignments, I think we should exploit them. And answering to the name of atheist doesn't do it, because then the Muslims and Christians just say, "Oh, well, I understand what that guy thinks. He just hasn't found God." Yeah. I think Dan Dennett has a question here, and I'm reluctant to pass him up. I might as well take my licks publicly.
You might run all the way up there, Dan, but I'll tell you what. Let Lori ask this question, then I'm going to run up to you.
Okay.
Thanks. Thank you. If I understood you correctly when you answered the first question, I think you indicated that more important than having our names for a movement is getting the bills passed, like stem cell research. Mm-hmm. But you're a member of the advisory board of a group that would not exist if that were all that mattered, the Secular Coalition for America. And I thank you for that. But the only reason it exists, Americans United for Separation of Church and State, Interfaith Alliance, these other groups deal with those issues.
Right.
It exists